It's hard to explain because it was tears of joy and I was laughing, but I wasn't crying because I was laughing. I was crying because I was being touched by God. Like, it was an interesting experience to say the least, because I've never laughed that hard in any memory over the last like 20 years or so. So I was like, that's the fire. So October was kind of a big month for me. I started taking this class at church that was talking about the ways the Holy Spirit talks to us. And I remember back a couple years ago, I had dreams from God quite a bit. There was like a season where that was happening regularly, and it kind of passed. You know, God kind of works in these ebbs and flows through different gifts and things like that, and I really cherished that time. But in this class, they were talking about the idea that if God is trying to speak to you, you should cultivate how he's speaking to you. So if you want to hear, for example, if you want to hear from him through your dreams like I did, it's like, wake up after every dream, write down every dream, whether you think it's from God or not. Because if he's trying to talk to you and you're like, that's not important, maybe he won't be talking to you very much longer. So I took that to heart and I was like, all right, I'm going to start recording my dreams every night. And exactly like I explained, there was a whole slew of dreams that were just weird and didn't matter. And I was like, all of a sudden I'm getting like 4 dreams a night when I wasn't dreaming at all. So I'm not getting good sleep either. I'm just waking up every couple hours to write down this dream that doesn't matter. And so I had been doing that for a little while, probably about a week or so. One night I had this dream and I didn't even remember what it was. I just remember like fighting myself in my sleep, being like, I don't want to wake up. Most of my dreams don't matter. This one, like in the moment I remember like, this one doesn't matter. I don't need to write it down. But then I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. So I kind of like woke up out of that half sleep, went to the bathroom, came back to bed, on my phone, kind of just typed it out like real short, like bullet point almost. And then I went back to sleep. And so I was in the prayer room that morning with my wife and I was talking to her like, yeah, I had some dreams last night. You want to hear them? And so I opened up my little dream note app and I remember seeing this one because it was one sentence and it just said, you have it all, yet wait 21 days for fire. And I told my wife, I looked at her and I was like, that sounds important. Like God doesn't tell you to wait for fire for no reason. So at that point, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going on the Daniel 21-day fast. If you're not familiar, like Daniel had a dream and he's like, God, I need this interpreted. And he went on a fast and waited 21 days until Jesus showed up and interpreted for him. So I was like, yeah, 21 days, that's pretty, specific to the Bible. So I was like, I'll do that, 21-day Daniel fast. So we look at our calendar and the fast ends on the last day of this 3-day inner healing class that I had signed up for. It's called Journey to Wholeness. Our church does it like every quarter or so, and it's just 3 days of actually doing some like inner healing work and letting God like work some of those things out of you. So I was like, okay, that seems like another important marker of like why I had this dream. Like the 21 days like literally ends on the last day of this like inner healing thing. So I was like, all right, fire is gonna come. Like I was expectant. I've had, fire could mean a bunch of different things, but some of it is like I've had physical problems my entire life, and I was like, oh, fire's gonna come and I'm gonna get physically healed, or maybe there's some like emotional thing that I'm not aware of, and like that'll be healed, and it'll be awesome, and it'll be this testimony story, and it will be really cool. So I did the fast, we did all the things, just normal life kind of happened. Like I didn't even really spend much time thinking about it other than that I was eating a lot of beans, rice, and corn like every day. And so the weekend comes where I'm going to Journey to Wholeness. And my wife and I, we do deliverance ministry, which is a lot of prayer and inner healing work on its own. So like my thought process is, I'm gonna go to this 3-day class, I'm gonna learn a bunch of stuff, it's gonna be super awesome, and I'll be able to take what I've learned into our deliverance ministry to help people with the inner healing portion of it, which would be great. So I'm going into this as like an analytical, but also like open, like fighting my own urge to be analytical and be like, I just need to surrender and like be part of the process because clearly God wants to do something here. day one, they do this like every day. They give people an option to stand up and basically talk to the group and be like, hey, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm looking for out of this class. It's optional, whatever. And I felt like I was like, all right, I'm gonna stand up and say why I was here. And so like I stood up and I just felt like this like the Spirit hit me in that moment of like conviction. I was like, look, I felt like I was coming here to analyze and critique the curriculum so that like I could use some of that for my own purposes in our ministry. But there's this thing within me that I feel like I don't know what joy feels like. And I just start like telling my story of like, I remember as a kid being like so hyper, filled with joy, so much energy, and I've become like this. I'm like 40 years old, and my physical ailments, I'm like decrepit most of the time. Like have a hard time getting out of bed, hard time bending over on my back and my shoulders and my knees, and like everything hurts all the time. I've got chronic inflammation, chronic pain, like nerve damage, like all this stuff. Realistically, like I don't know how I got from super weird, crazy, obnoxious, like joyful kid to like what I am now, where like I'm monotone in everything I do. Like I remember in my prayer room just months ago, like I was meditating on Psalms 84. It's the better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Like there's a bunch of stuff there. Panting for God, like the deer pants for water, like all this. It's a love story about being in the presence of God, but like there's a section of it that says like shout for joy. And I remember being in my prayer room alone and shouting for joy to God, and like being in tears because I'm like, God, I feel so stupid right now. Like this feels forced, this feels fake, and I'm like weeping. I was like, God, I don't know what joy is. Like I'm not getting mad at God, but I'm getting frustrated at the fact that like I don't know what this thing joy feels like anymore. It's been gone for so long that like I don't understand it, and now I'm frustrated and upset because like you're telling me in your scripture that like this is the way that you like to be worshiped, and I can't do it. And so I'm like confessing these things to this group of people that I don't know like any of them. There's like 30 people there. And I was like, so I am expectant that I get to find out what joy feels like. And so that was that. The night goes on, do a bunch of inner working stuff, and I go home, and the next morning I wake up and I come into my prayer room. And I just felt like he showed me this picture, and like I'm not a sports guy. Like my body was in too much pain to even do sports past the age of like 16. And so like I saw this picture of like me running down a football field with this, like I had this glass orb in my hands, and it had like this dim light in it. It was just kind of flickering, like not like slowly, like dying almost. And people were coming at me, and I was like blocking them, like a football player would block to protect the football. And I felt like God was like, why are you even protecting that? It's not that great. And so like I was weeping because I'm like, wow, I've had all these protective mechanisms my entire life. Like I was the spastic weird kid. I had built all these defense mechanisms to push people away and decide whether or not they were valid enough to be a part of my life, all to protect like myself, this like thing that was glowing that like wasn't even that great, because that's not who God called me to be. Like God called me to be somebody who's filled with the fruits of the Spirit, and one of those is joy, right? So I'm sitting here weeping in this room actually, and I was like, okay. I go back to the second day of Journey to Wholeness, and I feel like God's speaking to me, he's working through me, and he's like, hey, joy isn't necessarily tall, like it's wide. Like joy is a wide thing. You could have joy without the like exuberant energy and stuff like that. There's tears of joy. There's There's joy that you have for like when your child's born. Like joy is different than just this like steep climb. And so like that was reassuring to me. And he was just speaking these little things over me. Like I saw the picture again, and I had dropped the ball or the glowing orb, and I started like running down the field with my arms out, like collecting these people who were coming after me, trying to take whatever I thought they were taking, and like just collecting these people. And so like there was this peace about the whole thing, and I was like, that was great. And we went through the entire like 3 days, and that's kind of like what I got out of it. Was God was just speaking these gentle, nice things to me. And so I was like, well, I wouldn't really consider that like fire, but it's all really good. Like I feel like I have joy now, and I can understand like the joy of the Lord a little bit more. And so Sunday comes around, and I go to church, and we have a guest speaker, and his entire message is about joy. And I'm like, go figure that, like, worship was really good. I was more, I had my arms up more than I normally would during worship. Like I was feeling kind of good. And he's talking about joy. And I was like, oh man, this is like something's going to happen. And I just remember in like those moments of ministry time, like I was just talking to God, and I was like crying a little bit. And then I just started laughing. Like uncontrollably laughing, like leaning over the chair in front of me, tears just running down my face. It's hard to explain because it was tears of joy and I was laughing, but I wasn't crying because I was laughing. I was crying because I was being touched by God. Like it was an interesting experience to say the least, because I've never laughed that hard in any memory over the last like 20 years or so. So I was like, that's the fire. That's what God promised me 21 days ago. So I was like excited. My wife wasn't even there. She had gone up front for prayer, so she didn't even see me laughing. And so I had to explain it to her afterwards, and she's like, what? And it's cool because like a couple days later, it happened again, like in front of her while we were talking about God. So she did get to experience it. But like I was like, that's great. That's joy. This is awesome. So the church also does Monday night prayer sets. It's worship again, a couple hours of worship, and they had the guest speaker there again. And I decided, I was like, I don't want this train to end. I'm going to go to that too. So I go to this by myself. In the middle of it, an hour or so in, our pastor basically does like an altar call for healing testimony. He's like, I feel like God's healed some people in this room, test injuries that you've had and see if anything is healed. And so like a couple people went up and were like, oh, my shoulder's healed, and like, oh, I couldn't do this before, and all that kind of stuff. And it's great. It's something that happens regularly at our church. And so I'm sitting there and I was like, well, my hands have been hurting recently. And I was like moving my hands. I was like, nah, that still hurts. And like, I've got some back problems. So I was like checking my back, and I was like, my back still hurts. And I was like, but you know what? Like, I was just on my knees, like worshiping, and like my knees always hurt. And I was like, but my knees, they don't hurt right now. And like they had been swollen from like the chronic inflammation. So I'm like touching them, and I'm like, the skin, like the muscle doesn't hurt. The tendons don't hurt. Like it doesn't hurt to the touch. It doesn't feel swollen. And so like, the funny thing is like he cut off the altar call for testimonies and just called people up who wanted healing to come up. And so like I went up, but like I never got to actually tell my story about being healed. So like God healed my knees. Like this is amazing. So anyways, the next day comes, which is a Tuesday, and I go evangelizing on Tuesday. And so I'm out there going evangelizing. I'm on this high of like, knowing what joy is like, and my knees are healed. But then I go to evangelize, and we're like walking around, and it's like, oh, well, my knees still hurt. Like, but they hurt different. It's like they were locking up. Like normally the muscles would be so strained and in pain, and like you could feel it from the outside. They were like swollen and they would hurt to the touch. But I'm like, it feels different. It feels like oddly like bone on bone, like things are locking up. I was like, I don't get it. Like I thought I was healed. And so like I kept thinking about it more and more, and next morning I was in the prayer room with my wife, and I was like, honey, like I don't know. Like I said like my knees were healed. I told people that my knees were healed, but like they still hurt. And I'm like, but they hurt in a different way. And I was like, they don't hurt to the touch. And I was like, you know what? For the last couple days when I'm worshiping, like I've been lifting my arms, and like I wasn't able to do that for more than like 5 seconds without them going numb and me having to put them down. And I was like, but they still hurt, but like I can lift them and I can hold them up. Like my knees still hurt, but it's different. And then I got up and I was like, I touched my toes. Like I bent over and touched my toes, and I was like, and I can touch my toes, which I haven't been able to do in 10, 15, 20 years. Like, I was like, honey, I don't think God healed my knees. Like, I think he healed all the inflammation in my body completely. I was like, yeah, things still hurt, but it doesn't feel swollen. It doesn't hurt to the touch. Like, I think he healed all the inflammation from my body. And so I started looking into like inflammation. I was like, what is inflammation? Because I've always had like blood tests of like high inflammation, and I haven't been to the doctor since, and I'm really looking forward to, because like I believe, I have faith that this is completely healed, and I will be looking for like medical documentation that is healed. And even if it's not, God is still good, and he did something in my body that is amazing, and I feel better, whatever it was. But so I started looking into inflammation, and for those that don't know, like inflammation is like if you get an injury, like inflammation is there to protect the injury while it heals. So what happens is inflammation is a protective mechanism. And chronic inflammation, what happens is it starts to protect the thing, but it doesn't realize that it's sticking around so long that it actually starts to destroy the thing that it was meant to protect. And I hope you understand where I'm going with this, is that in those 21 days, like God was calling me to give him something that I had been protecting spiritually, emotionally, or emotionally that was holding me back spiritually. But he's like, I want that. Like, I want you to face it, and I want you to realize that it's not that great. And that like I created you for something different. So I want you to step into that. And I had been surrendered enough to be like, you know what? You can have it. Like, I don't want it. I want joy more than I want to be protected, because I've probably not done a great job of protecting it anyways. Like when people say like, I don't know who I'll be if I give this thing up that has become my identity, I always tell them that like, hopefully something better. Like Christ does not replace something bad with something also bad. He always replaces it with something good. So when I was able to surrender and say, God, you could have my emotional defense mechanisms, he rewarded me with healing my physical defense mechanisms. And now I feel great, because not only have I been able to give up something I shouldn't have been holding on to anyways, but God like has given me so much grace, not only emotionally, but physically as well, that like I do feel like a new person. I feel like I know what joy is, and I get to play with my kids more without like the pain of inflammation, and I can get on the floor and I can play soccer. And yes, not everything's healed. Like I still have many, many physical ailments. But the thing is, I'm renewed. And that's the point, is that like when you spend time with the Lord, he's going to ask for stuff. And he's never going to stop asking for stuff. And the thing is, like when you give it to him, he will always replace it with something better. Because he's good. He says he's good, and he says that he's not a liar. So there can't be any option other than he is good. And so yeah, I was healed by God. And it was great.